Good evening and welcome to this Fox Nation live special, Anti-Semitism on Campus, Students Speak. I'm Brenberg. The anti-Israel movement on college campuses across the country is showing no signs of slowing down, despite efforts to clear campuses. The epicenter of the chaos right here in New York City at Columbia University, where overnight the NYPD reclaimed Hamilton Hall that was vandalized and overtaken by the so-called peaceful protesters the night before. But today, many of those calling to free Palestine were right back in the streets here in the Big Apple and joined by faculty members. Tonight, we've gathered a group of Columbia students to talk about what's unfolding and how the protests are impacting their lives and the country. Welcome to all of you. I'm so glad to have you here. This is a chance to go deeper. When we do normal television, it's 3 minutes, it's a quick thought, and we're out. But today, we want to have the full conversation. What are you seeing? What does it mean, and what do you want to do about it? And I want to start with, what is it that you're experiencing on campus? John, I'm going to go to you first. Tell us about what it's like right now. Give us the unvarnished picture on what it means to be a Jewish student on the campus of Columbia.
I can't speak for the Jewish students entirely, but on campus there's a lot of tension. The situation feels unsafe and that it can burst at any moment. I was on campus the night Hamilton Hall was taken. Situations like that feel like they can happen at any moment.
I see some heads nodding. Sam, your head's nodding. This consistent with your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of trespassing. There's videos of people breaking through the windows of the dormitories on campus. It's so easy to sneak in. I have no idea how many of the protesters are actual students. And that's pretty frightening. Yeah,
that seems to be the question. Noam, you're looking like, yeah, I've got some questions about that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, where do these people come from and how do they have access to campus? We know that Shai Davidai, the Jewish professor, wasn't even allowed inside campus. His IP was canceled because the university can't ensure safety. But then random people who I would consider terrorists are actually allowed in, like someone waving the Hamas flag even came in. My friend and I actually talked to public safety and asked for them to, remove this very dangerous student, but it turns out he wasn't even a student. And then public safety just told us that, the Hamas flag is just a symbol. It's not actually inciting violence. And we were just kind of left there to see a terrorist on campus, which is frightening.
Can you spot these guys? Like, is it easy to spot this?
Absolutely.
Talk about that. What do you see?
They're very recognizable. People's names and faces. Everyone becomes quite accustomed to who's a student, who's been suspended, professors that have been suspended. For example, Professor Mahmoud Abdul, who was suspended a long time ago. Shafiq brought him up at Congress and said he's been suspended and he's not allowed to work at Columbia anymore. You see him every single day.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask you this. You get a professor who your president said, gone. You're on campus, and that guy is still there every day right now. What do you feel like when you see that?
It's a wave of emotions. On the one hand, you're almost scared. Like, this is a professor that got fired because he wants the annihilation of the Jewish state, which extends to Jewish students. You know that you would not be safe in that professor's classroom. And that professor is in your campus, in your space. You're forced to interact with that person every day. So on the one hand, you're scared. On the other hand, you're infuriated. Why is this person still having access to my campus? Who else has access to my campus then?
Yeah, access seems to be a big issue. Noah.
I mean, I would say regarding access, students who don't live on campus right now in the buildings that actually are on campus have not been allowed to enter campus over the past 2 days, and it's caused issues. As a student, I'm in the joint program with the JTS program, and I can't even go on campus.
The JTS program is the...
It's a joint program with Columbia, so we live on 122nd Street in the JTS dorms, and we can't access dining halls on campus, we can't access the library, the gym, we can't even go on our own campus.
You can't get food, which you've paid for. You can't go to the health facilities, which you've paid for. It's finals week. Your campus is closed.
But it's littered with terrorists and pro-terrorist sympathizers and people who just want to tear down, harass people and create violence and just create unsafe systems.
You use the word infuriated. Is that how you feel?
For sure. I think there's also something quite ironic in the point that a lot of the protesters who stormed Hamilton Hall and obviously occupied it were asking for humanitarian aid, which is not only tone deaf to exactly what's happening in Gaza, but is also a slap in the face to everything that's being faced by students who live off campus, who can't access dining, and who can't access the campus in the same way that these protesters and outsiders are occupying the stage.
We've got some video of that humanitarian aid call. Can we play that video? And then I want you to react to what you see here. Let's go ahead and play that shot on humanitarian aid.
First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here. To allow it to be brought in, I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? This is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water? We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
Katie.
It's just abominable, and it just shows the level of entitlement amongst these people. They broke into a building using hammers to destroy private property on a building that, by the way, has a watering fountain on every single floor, and they have total ability to leave at any point. And instead, they decide to stay, claiming that they're a peaceful protest that's calling for an intifada revolution and wants to destroy both the state of Israel and America.
Jump in.
To be honest, I feel very sad about this situation, especially for the students, because these are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are committing career suicide over something they don't understand. How did this happen? I went to a panel with professors who have PhDs who teach at Barnard. They said that 9/11, they heavily implied that 9/11 was justified and Hamas is not a terrorist organization. And of course, you can convince that to students who weren't alive for 9/11. I was alive for 9/11. I remember it. And coincidentally, this was in November, shortly after Bin Laden's letter goes trending on social media. So I don't think someone like Kamani James woke up and chose violence. He was influenced by someone or something.
That's so interesting, Liam, yeah.
To his point on the professors, I feel if there are professors saying things like that, they need to be investigated by the university. And also back to the humanitarian aid that these students want. If they really want their aid, they can walk out of Hamilton, or could have walked out and went right to a dining hall. It's such entitlement.
I would say further, there's no one there to protect us on campus. That speaking for myself and for many of my fellow Jewish students, we don't feel safe. And I was there the night that Hamilton Hall was taken over, and I saw a public safety officer, and I asked him how this is allowed, and he said he's the bottom of the totem pole. He can't do anything. His sergeant said just to stand there, and then I saw an NYPD officer.
Wow.
And when I asked him why he hadn't gone on, he said that unless someone gets shot, he cannot enter campus that night.
So that's the threshold.
That's the threshold.
It's not any lower level of safety than getting shot.
Regarding
Victoria.
the access,
Yeah.
though, they only have the gates open on one side of either Broadway or Amsterdam, so you're forced to walk by the protesters. I was walking by, and I had to defend myself from an assault.
Is that right? Tell us more. I want to hear more, if you're willing.
So I'm walking, 116th and Broadway was closed. I had to walk up to 117th. I don't know the name of the gate, but the main gate on 116th was closed. Since it was closed, I had to walk by a protest that was heading south. I was heading north toward the gate. I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and I was shoved out of nowhere. I had to defend myself. The NYPD got involved very quickly. They took swift action, and I'm okay. And
Right.
I'm sure everything is fine, but
you're getting shoved on your way to campus, and the only door you can get through
to attend class.
And you got to walk right by the guys who are saying, I don't know, some of them it sounds like they're saying you shouldn't be here in the first place, Victoria.
Yeah, I think that one of the main issues is just the way that speech is being promoted, because although I do believe that free speech should be allowed, of course, in America, I think that a lot of the speech is not being is not actual free speech and should not be classified as such. And I think that there's also something to be said about the lack of speech that Jewish students are being silenced. We aren't allowed to talk. We aren't allowed to speak. I walk past these protests and I'm scared. I can't say anything to them.
All right, let's talk about free speech, because that's the word of the day. And the definition seems to change by the day depending on who's doing what, speaking where, and about what. Talk to me about what speech should look like on campus. What should free speech look like?
I mean, simply put, speech that basically promotes the killing of a group of students on campus should not be allowed. Also, according to Minu Shafiq, this kind of speech is in fact not protected. She said in her congressional hearing that speech that incites or promotes violence against any members of our community is not protected. I think we've seen over the last few weeks that it's certainly protected when you have a chance for, globalizing the Intifada or death to the Zionist state, or a chance where people say, we don't want no Zionists here. I mean, even outside of campus, there were a bunch of mobsters yelling at two of my friends that they want October 7th to happen over and over again. Just imagine for a second that the Jewish students on campus said anything reminiscent of Islamophobic. What would happen to us? We'd be canceled, we'd be suspended, we'd be expelled, and rightfully so, because that shouldn't be tolerated. But when it's in our direction, there's somehow plausible deniability, there's somehow, the benefit of doubt is given to these people. I was taught this lesson a long time ago, that when people show you who they are, you should believe them. And I think we've been shown time and time again who these students are. And every single time the administrators are like, hey, you know what? They're not that bad, it's fine. It's not fine. I mean, this is causing, physical violence. It's causing Jewish students to feel unsafe. We also know that Jewish students are packing up and leaving. So it's frankly ridiculous.
When somebody shows you who they are, you should believe them. Okay, so answer this question for me. Who are these protesters? That is a huge open question. I don't know that I know the answer. They're purportedly students. Is that who they are? Or tell me more about the makeup of the protester, yeah.
I feel like a lot of the protesters inside the campus are students. There's definitely some that are not students, but the problem is that it's bringing a lot of protesters outside the campus gates, which are mostly not students. And these protesters are violent, saying stuff, but students in campus are also violent, as we saw with they vandalized Hamilton Hall. But it is bringing a lot of protesters who are not students to outside the gates, which is a real problem.
Simply put, these people are terrorist supporters. At the end of the day, they say things like, we are all Hamas. We want October 7th to happen every day. They take Israeli and American flags out of our hands and light them on fire and stomp on them on the ground. They are people who are either wildly uneducated or are very strong supporters of death to America, death to Israel, death to the Jews, and terrorist organizations taking over.
Let me do like a poll. How many of you have heard on campus words like, we are all Hamas, or death to Jews, or death to America, or something very severe like that? Raise your hand if you've actually heard that with your own ears on campus. That's interesting, because I've spoken to some protesters on your campus. I was there yesterday. One thing they said is, there's nothing about these protests that should make anybody feel unsafe. But what you're telling me is, in fact, exactly the opposite of that.
I mean, yeah.
You go.
Looking at what happened with Hamilton Hall, I would say that before that, it was already tense on campus, and I already felt unsafe on campus. When I tried to enter the encampment to see what it was like, because I've heard all these reports, I tried to enter. I was told that I couldn't enter unless I took a loyalty pledge to the liberation of the Palestinian people. And I said, I can pledge support for the Palestinian people because I do support the innocent civilians who need help, and they need to be freed from Hamas, but I can't pledge liberation without understanding what that means. And they told me, those are the rules. To enter, you have to follow the rules, which I think is the height of hypocrisy, because their entire thing is, we're here because we are students who pay for pay tuition for this, so we can be here. I'm a student who pays tuition as well. Why can't I be on the lawn?
Loyalty pledge. Jump in on that.
I went into the encampment, actually. The reason that I went into the encampment is, for quite a few days beforehand, I would go outside and watch. And I have some friends that support the movement, so sometimes I'd catch them and have a conversation before they went inside. I think there are a lot of people inside that encampment who are intelligent and they're trying to formulate their own opinions. But one of the people I spoke to was an Arab Israeli who was inside the encampment. We heard him speaking Hebrew and we're like, oh, that's interesting. We're going to start speaking. What happens? They have a set of community guidelines at the entrance of the encampment. One of the guidelines is that you are not allowed to interact with Zionist counter-protesters. If you try and talk to someone inside the encampment, they have camp leaders who have yellow vests on, They quickly, within 2 seconds, they will come, pull the person away, and be like, don't listen to them, don't talk to them. But this guy, he decided to come out of the encampment and speak with us. He was kicked out, but he decided to come speak with us. Me and him spoke for 30 minutes. We agreed on almost everything. We both want peace. He's from Haifa. We speak the same language. And I said, so tell me about the atmosphere inside the encampment. Like, what do you hear? Is it actually peaceful? And he says, honestly, I've overheard people in the encampment say, kill all the Jews. There should be one state. It's an Arab state. And I was like, that's crazy. I want to go inside and see what it's like. So I went inside a few days later, and the first thing we were directed to were the community guidelines. You look at them, whatever, you go inside. Immediately, we were followed by a faculty member the entire time.
A faculty member?
A faculty member.
Can I just, I want you to keep going, but I want to, so you've got the Pledge of Loyalty, you've got community guidelines, you've got camp leaders wearing vests. This is the contours of the student protest at Columbia. Please continue. I'm fascinated.
So we walked around a bit this entire time. This faculty member, someone whose bills I pay, was stalking us. Everyone started staring at us. We were wearing our dog tags, bringing them home. It was the first time in my life that I've ever felt subhuman. People were whispering about me, looking at me like I was some alien. When I was with a friend who's religious, and she goes to the faculty member, she goes, I've heard that there are a lot of Jews in the camp. It's the Passover. I would love to share a piece of matzah with them and wish them a happy holiday. Could you please point them out to me? She wouldn't reply to any of us. Students came up to her. They said, do you need help getting rid of the Zionists? She was like, I've got it under control. She would not talk to us. It was like we were invisible. They then had a private meeting, the leaders, where we were sitting. They pushed us out. They held a sheet up in front of us. We had then 3 faculty members stand in front of us.
Faculty members?
Faculty members. No, they gave us their names. They told us what courses they teach. So we started speaking to one of the faculty members. This was very strategic because this was the first time that the faculty members decided to talk to us when there was a private meeting right in front of us that they didn't want us to listen into. And it was very illuminating, some of the things the faculty members had to say. I
want to dig in on faculty more. Daniela, I saw sort of a look of disgust growing on your face as you were listening to the story. Have you experienced some of this or been in proximity to the encampment? I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been listening to all my friends, and when I hear it time and time again, I'm disgusted from the beginning. And I went into the encampment. I had a similar situation. I wanted to see what was going on, truly with no antagonistic intention. I really just wanted to see what was up there. Yeah. And I went in with a couple of my friends, and I had a similar experience to Sabrina, where they immediately surrounded me. They were instantly aware that I was like not one of them. I wear my dog tag from the IDF. I think I had it out. I don't remember. Okay. I think they saw it. And they immediately said, like, who are you guys? Don't take photos and videos of us. Sorry, we're all just like on high alert right now. I said, no worries. I just walked around. There were a million flags. There was one that had a bunch of Arabic written all over it. I took one picture when I was there, and it was of the flag. Then one of the students there approached me. This was after they're all saying, like, I think you guys should leave. And I'm like, why? Like, am I antagonizing you? We just think you should leave. And then I said to them, or what? And they got really close. One girl got really, really close to me and said, do you want to find out? And that was a threat. Yeah. And it was very clear. And this was a girl who was actually taking photos and videos of me after I had been asked not to do the same to them. Yes.
Others who have had experiences with the encampment, share. I want to hear.
I'd actually like to follow up on what Daniela said, because I was there. We went to the public safety officers. There were only 2 of them on the entire campus. They were standing maybe 100 or 200 feet away from the encampment, and we said, we were just physically threatened by this person. We could point them out there wearing distinctive clothing. Public safety is wildly outnumbered, or was wildly outnumbered on campus before the NYPD came in and did what they did. So they said, oh, go file a report. So we go file a report in this office on the backside of campus. There's no follow-up. We're telling them this person threatened us, and we can tell you exactly who they are, and there's no response. And I feel bad for public safety because they're being hamstringed, or they were being hamstringed by our university. If you staff 2 public safety officers, unarmed, probably minimal training, to deal with 500 students, many of them not actually students, who are emboldened by the lack of action by the university. It is a recipe for disaster. For the last 2 weeks since the encampment came up, when there was that congressional hearing, everyone has been telling everyone, this is going to escalate. Someone is going to get hurt. Property is going to be damaged. And nothing was done.
Yeah.
That strikes me in and of itself as a message. 500 protesters, 2 public safety officers. That says something, doesn't it? Just even the staffing level of that says something about how serious the administration is taking
And it's not just dangerous to the Jewish students on campus who might be targeted because of their Stars of David, because of their yarmulkes. It's dangerous to the other students on campus. It's dangerous to the public safety officers. There's no reason to have 2 of them there. They might as well have 0 of them there. And we saw this happen at Hamilton Hall. There were 2 public safety officers who were actually trapped inside. There was a poor janitor who was shoved and had to defend for himself. These are people who have no affiliation with Israel, Palestine, whatever. They
Just
wanna
doing their
go about
jobs.
lives.
Just
Exactly.
doing their jobs.
Exactly.
Right.
I would like to follow up on the faculty.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's so unfair to the faculty who has just been so good at their jobs. I love Columbia. A lot of these professors have changed my life. I hope to be friends I'll have for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, the few who are a part of the devastation on campus are taking away from that. And I think that's such a great comparison to what's happening overseas. The plight of the Palestinian is very real. These protesters are taking away all the sympathy towards that.
Interesting.
Well, the administration in general has shown ineptitude. They made no actions. This has been going on since October 7th. How long are we since then?
Yeah.
So just in general, nothing has been done to quell the tension on campus. It's just exploded. It's gotten higher and higher and higher until the students take over a building, until students are getting assaulted, until students are being harassed, until American flags are being burned. Sam and I, we stood on the front of an alma mater, the statue that's in front of Low Library, with our American flags. Many of the working faculty came up to us, hey, we really appreciate you guys, the public safety officers, the people who are serving these same kids their food every day. They said, we feel unsafe about this, and the administration had done nothing.
It started out as only just the 2 of us and turned into 10, 15. We had a lot of support. There was a couple celebrities that called us white supremacists on Twitter, which was great.
Wait, they called you white supremacists for doing what again?
Holding an American flag.
Raising an American flag.
And we were
at
the
an
most
American university.
I would say we were the most diverse-looking group of white supremacists.
I would also say I was with Noam the day, I think it was Thursday, when the
You're
first...
with this Noam.
Yeah, I was with this Noam right here on the day that the arrests first happened, when the encampment was first taken down, and the day after the hearing. And I remember very clearly the man who pulled up the Hamas symbol on his phone and pointed at it and said, I'm with them, I'm here for you, pointing at us and saying, I'm here for you. And to me, what I have to say about the encampment and about the idea that it's, people often say, oh, it looks so peaceful from the outside. But I can tell you, these people are complicit in anti-Semitism, if not actually doing it themselves. And to be complicit is tantamount to doing it yourself. And also, I too entered the encampment. I want to echo what Daniela and what everyone else has said, is that the second I stepped on, I was wearing this jacket here with the hostage pin and the blue square. Yeah. The second I stepped on, I felt like an outsider, and they ensured that I felt like an outsider.
You know, it doesn't look like violence, or it doesn't look threatening if somebody holds up a phone. But if there's somebody on the phone who's a murderer, and they're saying to you, this guy I'm with?
He was holding, sorry, let me clarify. The man was holding up a symbol on his phone. He pulled up a picture of the Hamas flag and said, I'm with them, saying, I'm with Hamas.
Even worse than a symbol. On our campus, there was an individual who participated in the October 7th massacre in Israel on Israeli and American innocent civilians on October 7th. And I called public safety to let them know that that individual was on campus. And public safety said, quote, how do you expect me to find one random individual amongst all of these people? That's their job, but they've been entirely handcuffed by this administration who, everyone has said, has done absolutely nothing of consequence since October 7th until last night when they thankfully let the NYPD finally do their job. But it's just been horrific. And frankly, anti-Semitism at Columbia has been a problem before October 7th.
I kind of want to get into that.
And they have known about it for years. Joseph Massad, who is a professor, has worked at Columbia for many, many years.
Yeah.
He's been known to be an anti-Semitic professor, and he went on October 7th to say that the attacks on innocent Israeli and American civilians were amazing and awesome. And this man is allowed to teach in a university in the United States of America. That is disgraceful.
You got a couple of neighbors who want to jump in. Go ahead.
I think Noah made a really good point that I just want to dwell on for a second. He made this point that there are a lot of outsiders claiming that these protests are peaceful. I just want to say something that's been incredibly frustrating in my eyes, and I'm sure a lot of them will agree. There are these token Jews, that's what I like to call them, who basically renounce their Judaism, don't associate with Judaism in the slightest bit. Even to me, they've renounced their Judaism. I was at a tabling event earlier this year for Mizrahi Heritage Month, and this kid who's like the prominent face of JVP told me, I renounce my Judaism.
JVP.
Jewish Voices for Peace.
Got it.
Anyway, so he told me himself that he renounces his Judaism. But then, you know, the second CNN comes, he puts on a tallis, he puts on his kippah, and he sits in the middle of the camp and leads a seder. And what's really frustrating there is that there are guys like Mark Ruffalo from the outside who are, you know, hopping in from their high horse saying there's no anti-Semitism. Mark Ruffalo, I understand that you're famous, but you're not on campus. Also, there's Professor Howley, the Jewish professor who I've never seen associate with the Jewish community once, come in and say, they're teaching about anti-Semitism here, so clearly there's no anti-Semitism. Well, Professor Howley, these same kids who are teaching about anti-Semitism are also the modern-day Nazis. They're the ones saying, let's globalize the Intifada, let's target Jews. They're the ones who are encouraging harassment against Jews. So it's really frustrating when these token Jews step in, act like they understand what's happening, and then kind of make it as if we're weaponizing anti-Semitism.
And these Jewish students not only had what they called a Passover Seder, which they spelled cedar like the wood.
They misspelled it.
Yes, completely. But they also have Seder plates where instead of writing parsley, they write occupation and then wrote the Hebrew in backwards. So I don't know how strong these people actually feel tied to Judaism unless it promotes this terrorist agenda.
Going off of that, just to explain a little more, when she says that they wrote it backwards, you write Hebrew from right to left.
Yes.
And they wrote it the opposite way. And it was illegible, it was inaccurate. And it's ridiculous.
It's just another mockery. It's just another the whole encampment is a mockery. There is a genuine humanitarian crisis occurring in Gaza. No one is denying that. When you put tents and say paint your nails for Palestine, and you have dance shows and you've got arts and crafts.
Paint your nails for Palestine.
Paint your nails for Palestine. Well, you're mocking the war. You're mocking what's going on there. And all the media in the world has got their cameras on these kids who are twerking for Palestine, doing arts and crafts of Palestine. Meanwhile, Hamas releases a video of Hirsch, who's a hostage with his hand cut off, begging for the US government to do something and release him. The media doesn't cover it because it's way more exciting to put your cameras on kids who put kafirs on and are chanting these fancy little chants and are coming up with all these catchphrases, paint your nails for Palestine. It's insane.
Yeah.
I think something that was very telling was only a couple days after October 7th, where Jewish students and Israeli students didn't have a day to mourn. There was a protest by the pro-Palestinian students celebrating the attack.
One day.
Just a couple of days. I had friends who were still getting ready to fly back to Israel because they were on orders. This could have been a moment where Palestinian and Israeli students could have gone together to condemn this attack, and we could have focused our attention on criticizing what's going on the other side, but they doubled down on it.
Does it seem just really artificial and suspect to you that quickly all of these kids, when something devastating has happened to this population, immediately say we're going to protest in favor of this population? Like that does not seem organic. A lot doesn't seem organic to me. That doesn't seem organic.
There are nefarious undercurrents. I don't know quite what they are, but there's a sense that there are nefarious undercurrents that are moving these protests, as they call them.
However, I don't think that it's very surprising, unfortunately, because as I said before, there has been anti-Semitism on Columbia's campus for decades. It's a known issue, and this is what these people believe. There are some undoubtedly who are sheep, who are following suit, but honestly, if you're chanting globalize the Antifada, you might want to Google what Antifada means before you say it. You have these are students at an Ivy League university, one of the premier universities in the world. They're not people who are in Gaza who don't have access to the internet. They're not people who have restrictions on what they can Google, they can find anything. There are 5,000 Jewish students at Columbia they could speak to and learn about this. They actively choose not to because they are anti-Israel, anti-Jew, and anti-American.
Victoria, you've wanted to get in. I want to get you in here.
Yeah, I think that the major thing that's being highlighted by this encampment is just the privilege that these people have, that they garner. As we've seen in the media, there's a bunch of people who come from very wealthy families and are very well off, but they want to play the victim. They want to pretend like they're in Gaza. But I think it's really upsetting because they're firstly taking away, but also showing their privilege by trying to pretend like they're also just as bad off as those who are actually facing a crisis. And I think it's very telling because there's a dominant narrative that's being pushed, not only in the encampment, but also in classes, which silences others. So for example, I can't say that I'm in the Tel Aviv Columbia dual degree program. I lead by saying I'm in one of the dual degree programs before I get a gauge on what the professor thinks. And I also stay away from certain classes because I know that late in October, there were a bunch of professors who signed a letter basically recontextualizing the October 7th attack.
All right, let me go there because we brought up the professors a few times, and I want to just tie a couple things together. One, I appreciated Sam. You said, look, there's a lot of professors who I have great relationships with. I want to be friends for a long time. Undoubtedly, that's got to be the case, okay? On the other hand, if something's going to persist at a university for a long time, it's not going to be the students that cause it to persist because they're there and they're gone. The people who are there a long time, and you know this, and one of the reasons they're there for a very long time is because they have tenure, are professors. So, recognizing there's a balance there, tell me about the role professors play, because I think whatever they play at Columbia is going to be true at a lot of other universities. Yeah, Daniela, go ahead.
The first thing that comes to mind when I think of professors at Columbia who might have been teaching things that are anti-Israel, Edward Said. He was a very prominent professor at Columbia. We all know him. He wrote Orientalism, which was actually the first text that I was introduced to, even in my orientation before I even started classes. I was in a seminar, how to dissect difficult texts. This was the text that was given to me. We have Rashid Khalidi, who is a Said professor. So again, like it's one thing leading to another. It's one professor's in for a long time, then he's bringing in other professors. They're staying for a long time. And again, these professors are teaching maybe multiple classes a semester. And some of these are, massive seminars with hundreds of students. I was in a lecture with Khalidi on November 16th this year.
And give us a little context. Khalidi, why does that name matter? A lot of viewers may not know that professor.
Rashid Khalidi was a spokesperson for the Palestinian Liberation Organization after it was deemed a U.S. terrorist organization. And he's saying things to students who really don't know enough about the conflict, like Israel, and this is almost a direct quote, Israel has no political or military agenda in waging this war in Gaza. Israel is simply using this as a pretext to destroy Gaza. When I left that lecture hall, I heard students saying how profound Khalidi had been, and that's...
I would like to make a more immediate suggestion for a remedy to fix what's going on in Columbia's campus with regards to the faculty. There are dozens of faculty members who are or were actively aiding and abetting the protests after it was determined that they were disrupting campus. These are professors who are hosting their classes, their review sessions, and their discussion sections on the lawn. These are professors who were involved in blocking the entrance to the lawn so that Jewish students like us couldn't get on campus. If you work for the MTA in New York and you lie down on the subway tracks and the subway can't go through, you're immediately fired.
Right.
So these professors are not interested in engaging in intellectual debate because they have nothing intellectual to say. They want to disrupt the ongoings of the university, and they need to be fired immediately. It's not complicated.
I saw so many nodding heads on that comment. Tell me more.
I mean, I also just want to discuss sort of, in addition to the professors, who I would say are supposed to be there to support students and make us feel as if, make it easier. They're here for us. They're here for the students.
They work for you.
Exactly. I would say that I was surprised. I'm a first year. This is my first year here. I have no real precedent to go off of, but I would say I was surprised by the Jewish community's response, or members of the Jewish community's response, which we discussed. But I would say to the Jewish people who as Noam said, take out their talis and take out their yarmulke in a very performative way when it comes time to go to media, I would say this to them. I would say, I sympathize with those in Gaza that have no way out. And as has been talked about here, there is a humanitarian crisis, a true humanitarian crisis there. But I also can't get rid of the images in my head that I saw after October 7th of the Hamas terrorists parading around the bloodied bodies of the Jewish hostages and the dead and some of the other Jewish victims who were dead, the dead bodies, and the civilians were cheering as they paraded them back into Gaza, back into the Strip.
Wow.
So I would say to the Jewish students who are in the encampment, and who all of JVP and who stand with SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, I would say to them to come join your Jewish brothers and sisters, and we will open you with welcome arms. Join us in calling for a ceasefire and the immediate release of the hostages, and then help us find a peaceful solution to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Can I get your reaction to something on this? Because we've been talking about your fellow students. I'm very interested, as a former college professor, I'm very interested in the protesters and how they articulate their views and why they're there. I want to understand this. I went up to your campus yesterday to ask the protesters about this. I want you to take a look at the response I got as I tried to engage with them. Watch this. Would you mind if I asked you some questions just about what's going on here?
Not media trained, so we don't do
Oh, that's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be media trained.
Look, nobody is actually unsafe, regardless of what anyone says they feel like.
Could you just tell me more about what you're asking for?
I'm not a spokesperson for the movement, but...
No, I don't need a spokesperson. I'm just, because you're just out here.
We're not media trained, sorry. We don't talk.
It's okay. You don't have to be media trained. Almost nobody ever wants to talk about October 7th at these things. I'll ask about October 7th.
I mean, this is a very complicated and nuanced issue.
If you want to talk to someone, you can talk to someone who's been trained to talk to the media.
Oh, I'm just curious about the divestiture calls.
I can't help you. You can speak to the media liaison.
We're angered by our government's support for a foreign ethnic cleansing and genocide. And yeah, that's going to set some people off.
All right, help me out with this first. Almost everybody I talked to felt like they had to have media training to speak
I'm not
with
media
me.
trained.
I'm not media trained either. Now, can I just say something? Nobody in real life speaks that way. Nobody has that phrase on the tip of, even if they are concerned about talking to the press, they don't go to
They've been told to say this.
So tell me about this. Why are all your smart classmates at an Ivy League school who are willing to chant in public about things like divestiture? Where does this come from, this I need the media training thing? Tell me about this.
I think that, and especially since the encampments have happened, there's something very interesting going on. It's not new. It was termed in the 1970s as groupthink. It's a social psychology phenomenon. When you have a group of people in a closed-off area and they are not allowed to engage with alternative rhetoric, us being the alternative rhetoric, because one of their rules is you cannot engage in conversation.
Right, the rules.
Exactly. What allows that to happen is that they can streamline one kind of way of thinking, which is a very anti-Jewish, very anti-Zionist, way of thinking, but it also allows them to view the other, again, which is the Zionist students on campus, as an entity rather than individuals. It allows them to dehumanize us and thus call for our eradication, because we're no longer individuals, we're just an evil entity. And a lot of the people in the encampment are moderate, they're kind, they're nice people. But when you have leaders like Kamani James saying they should be glad that I'm not out there murdering Zionists right now and Zionists don't deserve to live, and that's the only message they're hearing, that is a hotbed for radicalism and anti-Semitism.
I don't know names, but one day when I was walking by the encampment, one lady or one student, a young girl, was leading everybody, and she was saying, clapping her hands, if you are not media trained, do not talk to the media. She was leading them as if she was telling them the words to say. So that's kind of where it comes from. Where she got her information from, I'm not sure. Another thing of note is when you do talk to the other protesters, I've had classes with them. You know, I see them, I recognize their faces, despite them wearing masks, which is ironic. You know? Right. Like, you can still recognize them. You see who they are. I tell them, hey man, what's going on? And using words like collectivism and us and like us versus them, and attaching themselves to something that they're really not even a part of.
the jargon that comes out was apparent to me. Here's what was also fascinating. So I went up to some of those students and I said, can I talk to you about, because I'm a business guy, and they're talking about divestiture and your endowment, and so I want to talk to you about that. And there was a young woman like you just described who said, I'm not going to speak. First she asked where I'm from, and then she said, I'm not going to speak to you about this. But then she did the thing that you just described. She turned to the rest of the group, and this is like infantile, and she goes like this. Like, you're not going to speak to this man. But what was crazy to me is another journalist came up almost right after me from an international outlet. I don't know where they were from, not American. And boom, she was right in telling them anything they were asking, and I don't know what they were asking.
I think we've all experienced something similar. I know that we've heard today some accounts of people who tried to enter the encampment. In large part, a lot of it is profiling. If you look a certain way, or they know that you are associated with a certain movement, whether it be SSI, or if they think that you're Jewish and not part of JVP, they, as we've heard today, with me and with Daniela and with others who have tried to enter the encampment or who have entered the encampment, they follow you and they watch you. And as much as they preach peace and they preach sort of kindness and inclusivity, it's exactly the opposite. And I was walking from my dorm to go to campus when I was stopped in the street by someone who saw my yarmulke, and he said, well, "You're not Jewish." I was like, "Excuse me?" He goes, "You're European. You're not Jewish. You don't look Jewish," and then proceeded to harass me and follow me, claiming that I'm not Jewish. And I've experienced this on campus as well. Students who have made these claims, sort of, But what's so interesting is you asked earlier, who are these protesters? Right. And I think that I would love to hear some of my peers here, their thoughts as well. But many of them claim to be Palestinians. They have this chant that they say, what is it? We are all Palestinian. Yeah, we are all Palestinian, right? And that to me is just, it's so shocking to me because many of them are not. I mean, there may be students in there who identify as Palestinian. I'm not going to tell someone how they identify. That's terrible. And it really hurt me when someone told me I don't identify as Jewish. It's how I identify. I am Jewish. But I would say we should really look at, and I would love to hear you guys, what does it mean? Who are these people? Many of them claim that they're Palestinian, but they're not.
Going off of what Noah said, the irony of all ironies is that these students claim to be people who are the most inclusive of everyone. They stand up for minority groups.
They'll chant it at you.
Yeah, they speak up for the oppressed, right? They have this obsession with being victims, with being oppressed. You see them in their $500 North Face tents pretending to be Gazan civilians.
Do they actually have North Face?
Yes, they're all the exact same.
North Face?
Yeah,
yes.
They're all the exact same $500 North Face tents, but they are obsessed with being oppressed, and they view Israel as the oppressor rather than Hamas, who is the real oppressor of the Palestinian people, who is a terrorist organization. They are just so obsessed with this narrative, and they view Jews and Americans and Israelis as the oppressors, and therefore they are fundamentally against them and everything that they stand for.
I want to get Liam and then Noam in real quick. Liam.
I think a big problem is that it's also really hard to get these protesters to acknowledge the brutality of the October 7th attack. If you ask them if they condemn Hamas or October 7th, a lot of them just won't respond. I just think that's like a real problem. Where's the sympathy towards the Israelis who were killed and displaced? It's just like when they say we are all Palestinian, it's just sympathy towards the Palestinians. Where's the other side?
Right. Not just Jewish Israelis, Bedouin, Arabs, foreign workers from Thailand, the Philippines, Americans.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Noam.
Yeah, I mean, just by observing these students, I really think that they'd rather appropriate oppression and demonize Israel than actually do anything that helps Palestinians in a constructive way. I don't even consider them pro-Palestinian. I consider them pro-victimization because they make it all about themselves.
Yeah. I
myself am the internal outreach chair on SSI, so my job is to basically communicate with other student organizations on campus.
SSI is?
Students Supporting Israel.
Got it.
Actually, Danielle and Sabrina are also on, great members. Anyways, so my job is to basically connect with other clubs on campus. I've sent countless emails to other clubs to create, dialogue-centered events. I sent an email to the Baha'i Faith Club because, I've been to the Baha'i Gardens myself in Haifa, beautiful. I thought, why not let's create, an event where students can come together and talk about something that they share. I haven't gotten a single response, and I've sent emails every other week to try to create events that could actually promote constructive conversation.
Wow.
So it honestly baffles me that I'm in the top university in the world with students who want to affect real change in the world. But the second they see that you're a Zionist, they disregard you as a human being, and they have no desire to connect with you. Also, just one more example. Yeah. We brought in an Arab-Israeli journalist to come speak. Yosef Haddad, I'm sure you guys have heard of him. He has an organization that promotes like Arab integration to Israeli society, very pro-peace, very constructive dialogue, probably would have occurred at that event. He was punched outside of the gates of 116th. The event was subsequently canceled. And guess who he was punched by? The SJP side. So, I mean, I think that tells you all you need to know about how destructive this group is, as opposed to constructive. And I would not say that they're pro-Palestine.
Another very illustrative example of that is that in negotiating with these terror supporters, the administration offered for them to directly invest in early education and displaced academics in Gaza. And they turned it down so that they can sit in their tents and continue harassing Jewish and American students. They obviously don't care about civilians anywhere. They only care about this terrorist agenda.
I want to get to, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I want to talk a little bit about the road ahead and what might work. And I want to start that conversation just by talking a little bit about what we've heard and not heard coming out of the White House on these issues. Listen to this clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about solutions.
How do you explain his silence this week?
The president has not been silent on this issue when it comes to hate speech, anti-Semitism. He launched the first ever anti-Semitism strategy to counter anti-Semitism, something that no other president did. No other president did.
A school building at an Ivy League campus got taken over.
And we call that out, and we said that is not peacefully protesting. Taking over a building at a university or college is not peacefully protesting. And we've been very clear. Taking more than 100 new actions to deal with anti-Semitism in this administration, no one has ever done that before. Not any other administration has ever done that before. We're going to continue. We're going to continue to do the work.
All right, the work. I don't know what those 100 initiatives are. There's an academic exchange there on what an anti-Semitism task force or something is. That's the White House press briefing. But I want to put something else on the table, and that is, you've got some colleges out there. It's not your college, but you've got some out there where this stuff flared up and it flamed back down again really quickly. One of those is the University of Florida. One of the lines from how they communicated with their students was, "This is not a daycare." That's how they prefaced what they were going to do. Okay, so you've got Florida, you've got the White House. Talk to me about what you want to see on campuses to help colleges become colleges again.
Leadership and morality. I think it's that simple. I think that we need a leader who has a moral compass and who has values that should be upheld in this great country, and that we are making sure that everyone is protected and their civil rights are protected regardless of any factor. And either President Shafiq needs to somehow find that morality and those leadership skills to enact it, like we saw at the University of Austin in Texas and the University of Florida, or she needs to find a new job.
It's disturbing that as Jewish students at Columbia, and as many other non-Jewish students probably feel, we have to appeal to the federal government because our university, our city, and our state have failed us. If you live in Florida and you go to the University of Florida, you can rely on the president or chancellor of your university. You can rely on your governor to make obvious statements that anti-Semitism is bad and will be tolerated. We shouldn't have to rely on the president of the United States. I'd like to think he has more important things to do.
That's a good point.
I think a major thing that we're lacking is also compassion. I mean, as my fellow students have mentioned, we have no communication. It's an extremely exclusionary type of rule that's occurring, and not only in the encampment, but also in classes. Regardless of your views, you're not allowed to say them. If it disagrees with the professor, or if it disagrees with like the dominant ideology that's being pushed by the university itself.
Interesting.
The schools are supposed to be bastions of free speech and dialogue. And then to have the fear of hearing a counterpoint to what you think you believe or what you think is right, it goes against everything that an institution like Columbia stands for. So I don't understand why, this great country, the country that I signed up to fight for, it stands on free speech and dialogue. So on our campus, there should be safe places for dialogue, not where students are harassed or feel like the threat of violence is incoming. It doesn't make sense to me.
I'd take you one further on that. shouldn't the whole campus be the quote-unquote safe space for dialogue? Should there be any corner of the campus that's not a safe space to talk about your differences? I mean, isn't it crazy almost that we're now just bargaining for a corner of the campus where we can do this, when in fact that's the whole point of a university, to bring different disciplines together? The professor in me is coming out now. But that's what we're supposed to be doing, aren't we?
And
Absolutely.
To that point, I want to say, you know, I'm a creative writing major. I'm not into politics. I just want to write books. I have classmates who probably hate that I'm on here right now. You know, students who work at FIAs, I'm always open to talk to them. I do not hate any of them. I'm even Kamani James, I think he made a huge mistake. I'm willing to shake his hand and talk to him. But when it comes to Catherine Frank, when it comes to faculty members like Joseph Massad, shame on them.
I would say that when I was at a demonstration on Thursday, a student wearing a keffiyeh approached me, and I didn't realize that I knew her until she started speaking. And she said to me, "I can't believe you're here." I was holding an Israeli flag. And I said, I'm sorry that upsets you. She goes, "I can't believe you're here." And I said, I would love to have a conversation in an environment that's more conducive to respectful dialogue. And she goes, "I'm sad to know that we were once acquaintances," and then walked away. Later, she then reached out and she offered to have a respectful sort of a conversation, but it was the idea that in that moment, as we've heard so much, people are so unwilling to engage. I'm not media trained. I'm not media trained. What that really means to me is that I can't think for myself, and I'm scared of saying the wrong thing because I don't actually know what I stand for, and so I'm scared.
Yeah, in a moment where she had to play a role which said, "I can't relate to you," she wouldn't do it. When she got out of that spotlight, then the humanity returned. It seems to me on our campuses, this is my experience yesterday, in certain moments where it's about the message, where it's about the affiliation, the humanity is drained. It's them and it's us, and we don't treat you with respect. We don't relate to you like you're a rational human being. We relate to you like you are a barrier or an obstacle. And to me, that is the most antithetical thing you could possibly have on a college campus. Folks, that was one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a very long time. Thank you so much for being willing to share your experiences on campus at Columbia. And may I just say to you, my deep wish and prayer for you is that things can change so that you can realize what you dreamed about when you enrolled at that institution. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you at home for tuning into this Fox Nation special Anti-Semitism on Campus Students Speak. I'm Brian Brenberg. Have a good night.